God bless you. God bless you. We thank God for this day. We thank God for another clergy conversation today. And I'm so happy, so honored, and so blessed to have one of God's greatest preachers, teachers, mentors to so many of us young preachers, our friend and big brother, much beloved Pastor Reverend Dr. William Anthony Jordan, a proud pastor of the Lyons Unity Missionary Baptist Church, all the way in Houston, Texas, in H-Town. So, big bro, first of all, thank you for doing this and introduce yourself.
Man, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I watched you last week with our brother in the snow in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Yeah,
Uh,
Dr. Ellis. Yes, sir.
yeah, man, it was a great conversation, man. William Jordan, as you said, I'm in Houston, Texas. Been here 17 years at the Lyons Unity Church. So, man, again, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And big bro, let me just start this off by just saying, tell us a little bit about your background, where you were born, and your conversion to Christ experience.
Uh, Man, I'm from a little town called Alexandria, Louisiana.
Okay.
That's between Shreveport and Baton Rouge, central Louisiana. Uh, Man, I got saved at the age of 10
Yes, sir.
and started preaching at 19. You
At
know,
19. Okay.
yeah, yeah. I got my first church. I think I was, 23, 24, something like that. So this is my third assignment. I pastored 4 years in Alexandria and left there and went to Port Arthur, Texas for 2 years. And I've been here for 17.
Okay, awesome. So, when you were growing up, what was the name of your home church? The church you were when you came to Christ. What was the name of that church?
Man, that church is called the Second Nazarene Baptist Church. My pastor
Okay.
was at that time was the late Reverend John Lewis Valley.
Yes, sir.
He's now with the Lord. And I preached my first sermon there.
Okay.
Um, and then I soon transitioned to the Mount Triumph Baptist Church, where Reverend Joseph Franklin is the pastor.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you were growing up, watching your pastor and then transitioning to another pastor, um, was there ever an inclination as you were growing up to the call to the ministry? Were you admired by the call to the ministry, or was there something else that you wanted to do?
Man, I'm a church baby.
Yes, sir.
I'm a church boy, Doc. So church is all I know. But preaching was not on the agenda
Yes, sir.
at all, man. As a kid, growing up in church, I'm a youth usher,
Yes, sir.
youth deacon, and that kind of stuff. And you hear that stuff from older people. Boy, you gonna preach one day. It's on you. I'm like, I don't know what y'all see, but I'm going to take a bath because ain't nothing on me about preaching. I ain't preaching, man. Honestly, man, I was in ROTC in high school,
Okay.
and so, man, my dream was to go to the Marine Corps
Yes, sir.
and be an officer in the Corps and just have a lifelong military career. And so God blocked that.
Yes, sir.
And then I wanted to, be a cop. God blocked that, man. So it's
Yes,
like
sir.
everything I wanted to do uh, for my personal aspirations, God seemingly blocked everything until I ended up, doing what he wanted me to do in the area of full-time ministry. But the whole preaching thing, man, that was never on my agenda, man. I love church. I love God. I I've always been pro pastor, love my pastor, support my pastors, but preaching myself was never anything I wanted to do.
So you were called. So what age were you when you were called? You said you started preaching at 19. What age were you when you first felt the call, and how was that feeling for you when you first felt the call, and when you first felt that tug to preach?
Man, I think probably 18,
Okay.
but at 18, man, I'm not thinking about no preaching day.
Right. Right.
You know, my vision is elsewhere.
Yes, sir.
And my thinking, well, my thought process was, if I could do, wrong enough and get dirty enough, you know, God wouldn't he wouldn't use me. I'd be too dirty to use.
Yes, sir.
But man, the crazy part is, the more I did wrong, the stronger he called,
Wow.
the more he tugged. And so my preaching story is kind of interesting, man. I felt that tug. I knew it was there.
Yes, sir.
But at the same time, I had heard from elders I was going to preach. So I wanted to make sure I wasn't preaching based upon what they said, but based upon, that calling from God himself. And so, man, I wouldn't move. I
Mm-hmm.
would not do it. And at that time, Chris, I worked at a mental hospital
Mm.
on 4 to 12 shift. And
Yes, sir.
I had this kid, and he was schizophrenic, man. He had attacked the physicians, he had attacked the staff, and he was uh, in seclusion,
Mm.
tied down to a bed. I mean, literally screaming, hollering, cursing. The kid, man, maybe was 10, 11 years old. I mean, mental. I mean, he wasn't playing. He was in a bad way. And God had been tugging at me all day. And I'd said, God, listen, now I'll do this, but you're going to have to give me a sign. I mean,
Wow.
I'm not doing this until you give me a sign. And the sign I want is this. When I go in that room to untie him, because he was tied down. When I go in there to untie that kid, I want that kid to be in his right mind, talking to me with some sense.
Mm.
And like I'm talking to you, Doc, I went in there with my coworker. Uh, we loosed him, and that kid literally stood up and said, "Hi, sir. My name is such and such. How are you?"
Wow. Wow.
Told me his name, told me his age, told me he had to use the restroom, that he was hungry, and
Wow.
asked me would I be his friend.
Wow.
And I just told God, okay, all right, you won.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. I
That's
mean, he
that.
he he literally answered me that quick.
That's amazing. But
Yeah.
bro, you hit on something that I think is very important because when you were talking about people had always said that you were going to be called to preach, but you said something that I think would helps a lot helps will help somewhere said, I'm not moving until God says, not because of what people say, but I'm moving when God says it. So because some people will have heard that before, like you're gonna be a preacher, you're gonna be a preacher, but encourage somebody who has heard that about the importance of waiting on God and not doing it just because you hear somebody or hear people say that's what you're gonna do.
Now, mind you, Chris, I told you I'm a church baby. I'm a church
Right,
boy. So I have been in the pew when I've heard
right.
people talk about the preacher who can't preach.
Mm. Ruthless, ruthless.
I have been in the pews when I've
Yes,
heard people
sir.
say, "No, doubt he wasn't called; he just went." I've heard those comments in the pew. So, man, I'm like, no, y'all ain't gonna do me like that.
Right, absolutely.
But I think sometimes well, not sometimes, but certain preachers have glamorized preaching
Hmm.
as if this is some celebrity showcase,
Mm.
and it's all about cars, cash, and clothes and platforms. But man, this is the Lord's work,
Yes,
and this
sir.
is the Lord's word. And if you're preaching because this is some gig, uh, then you're in for a sad awakening.
Yes, sir.
And the same people who will send your call to preach and push you out there.
Yes, sir.
My mama said the proof is always in the pudding.
Yes, sir.
And when they push you out there to preach, and if you haven't been called, once you flunk and fall, those same people who said, I see it, it's on you, when you move without God, those same people will be the first ones to literally uh, talk about you on social media and every other platform. So you have to be sure that because number one, every preacher isn't called a pastor.
My goodness.
And every preacher won't be a Marcus Cosby or
Yes, sir.
a Ralph Douglas West or Freddie Haynes and pastor major churches and have major platforms. God needs someone in the backwoods of Texas and Louisiana. And so the thing about that is just make sure you're called.
Yes, sir.
And when you are called, don't just be called. Get some training with your calling.
Yes, sir.
And so because preaching now, man, it's like if you are, and maybe because I'm older now, it's like everybody's preaching. And I don't doubt anyone's calling,
right,
until I hear you.
Wow.
Now we don't
Yes, sir.
always hit a home run every
Right,
time.
right.
But that has to be some sign of your calling in your preaching.
Yes, sir. Yes,
And
sir.
so I just encourage preachers, man, to just know that you're called and don't listen to the applause of people, because Jesus shows us the applause of humanity can turn quick. From Hosanna to crucify him.
My goodness.
And they'll tell you, man, you called to preach. I see it on you, Doc. And then once you get up there, not being called and make a bust of yourself, that same group of people will be the ones to lead the attack on you. So just be sure that you spend time with God, and that you've heard his voice clear.
Yes, sir. Well, and you hit on it, but you hit on it already, and I want to ask this question because you hit on that, and this is another part of what you just said. You said everybody won't be a Marcus Cosby, everybody won't be a Dr. Ralph Douglas West, Dr. Marcus Cosby, or Dr. Freddie Haynes. So, and he said God needs people in the backwoods. So, and I want you to expound upon that, because I know that as young preachers and young pastors, we see all of this, but sometimes we don't know all what they've been through to acquire this, or what they have to do to maintain it.
Exactly. And I mean, even from, I'll use Dr. West, for example, son of our church. His first church wasn't Brook Hollow.
Yes, sir.
As a matter of fact, I think Doc got put out of his first church on his installation day.
Yeah.
While at Bishop College.
Yes, sir.
And he pastored, 2 churches before, he is where he is now. But here is the whole thing, man. When you're called to preach and called to pastor, you have to be comfortable with your assignment.
Yes, sir.
And your assignments. Because whether you're in Houston, whether you're in Port Arthur, whether you're in Alexandria or some small town in Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, those people's souls are important.
Yes, sir.
And they are the Lord's people. And the thing about God is, God, in my opinion, God rewards faithfulness. And if your assignment is in Colfax, Louisiana, or where that's down where I'm from, some little small town, man, preach. Don't have that mentality because the house ain't full. You won't labor as hard.
Wow. Say that again.
I've seen Dr. Marcus Cosby preach in Houston, Texas, in some smaller venues in Willow Avenue, of course. And man, it might be 15 people in the room.
Yes, sir.
But Cos is gonna preach like he at Hampton down.
Yes, sir.
I mean, he going to get that thing from start to finish.
Yes, sir.
And I believe that's what God requires of us. Don't limit the gospel because of your superstar mentality.
Wow.
Because you never know who's in the audience.
My goodness.
That person who you think is unassuming might be the chairman of a pulpit committee at some major place.
Wow.
And that could be your interviewer because there are only 10 people in the room.
Oh.
You limit your ability and God's power because, man, ain't nobody here. I ain't gonna go hard, man. I ain't gonna tie myself out. Ain't nobody here. That's not being faithful.
Wow.
Because now you make the gospel about you and crowd size.
My goodness.
And the gospel that you preach, someone could, guess what? Not go take their life. Reconcile with their loved one. But because you limit the gospel because you want to be heard and seen by a major crowd, God, in my opinion, God frowns on that.
Wow.
Yeah, God frowns on that.
Big bro, you helping us already, and we just got started with it. But I appreciate that as you're helping us because Dr. Leonard Smith said this on Twitter one day. He said, even though you may not preach at Hampton Ministers Conference, you are wherever you are assigned, preach every Sunday like that's Hampton's Ministers Conference.
Absolutely. Because again, your platform is your platform.
Yes, sir.
And there are gifts that you have that Cosby doesn't have.
Yes, sir.
There are gifts that you have Dr. West doesn't have. Everybody is gifted in their own area. And man, my first church, Doc, I love those people to this day. They took a chance on me. I was, I think, 24 years old. I think I went there with 15 people, maybe. And actually it's in a little town called Poland, Louisiana, which is between Alexandria and Marksville. It's in the country.
Yes, sir.
And let me tell you something, Doc. I went there. The building was old. They just recently built a new church under their current pastor. Building was old, Chris. Kind of like it was old, and poor microphone system. And Lee Field said to me, Dr. Lee Field said to me, never be ashamed about what you inherit. If God gave it to you, then preach. And let me tell you something. In the country with a small salary, 15 people, by the grace of God, it grew. But that I had Hampton every week. Because number one, I was just happy I had a pulpit. I was just happy that God found favor on me to actually charge me with leading his people and preaching the gospel. So the side of the church was my least. And I think we have to get beyond that now. Because Dr. Ralph West says that if Paul was alive today, Paul would see church growth different than you and I see church growth. Church growth now is how many butts in the seats. But I believe Paul would say, church growth is when your people grow spiritually in maturity.
Yes, sir.
Yes, so my thing is, man, be faithful over whatever God has given to you. And whether it's 10 people, 5 people, get your lesson. Because guess what? Those 5 people belong to God.
Yes, sir.
And don't limit God based upon your own ego because you think the house got that. We aren't that important. And we made ourselves the center and circumference of the Lord's church. And we aren't.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, like I said, you're helping us already. So you started preaching at 19. What was your first sermon?
Man, my first sermon was out of John's Gospel. I talked about lonely, not alone.
Okay.
Where Jesus said, I'm going to send you, I'm going to go away.
Right.
But the comforter will be there with you.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was and I found that first sermon several years ago when I still had a VCR, and I said, my God, I've come a long way. Them people
Right.
sit through that foolishness. That Lord have
Yes, sir. Well, so from age 19 to age 23, I believe you said it was when you first got called to your first church. What was going on through those 4 years? What were you doing to you know grow as a preacher? Who were you preaching a lot? Who were you listening to? What were you reading? What
mercy.
tips would you give to those who start out, but are starting in the ministry as well? Talk to us about that.
I spent a lot of time around older pastors,
Yes, sir.
and I still do.
Yes, sir.
Um, I want to hang around folk who got more than I got,
Yes, sir.
and that's been my mentality, man. And I did preach a lot, and that's because, in my opinion, um, I served older pastors.
Yes, sir.
Preachers don't do that anymore.
Mm.
I was the young guy in my city who would drive the older pastors around, or I would pack the bag, pack the coat, get the water, open the door. Uh, and so, man, a lot of my formative years were spent with guys who were wise,
Yes, sir.
pouring into me, and so they could trust me, and so they would recommend me. Can this boy preach? He's good. All right, well, if he trusts you, then you know you can come preach for me. Uh, Preaching, from reading for me, uh, my love for reading came from probably two guys. Dr. Lee Fields impressed on me. He's in Port Arthur now. Impressed on me this the students of reading, and Dr. C.E. McLean
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
in
Yes, sir.
Shreveport, Little Union Church. Um, Dr. McLean said to me, "Don't be a dumb preacher."
Mm.
He said, "Young man, no one asked you to preach.
Wow.
You said God called you to preach.
Yes, sir.
So act like it.
Mm.
Put something in your head, and don't be a pulpit clown.
Mm.
Don't rush to close, but you ain't said nothing."
Wow. My
And man,
goodness.
that stuck with me. He said, "Don't be a pulpit clown. Don't rush to close, the hoop and holler, but you haven't said anything." And
Wow.
he said, "If you hadn't said anything, what are you hollering for?"
Woo. My Lord.
And so for me, man, um, I I guess for me, who I listened to probably was Freddie Haynes.
Yes,
I
sir.
was somewhere preaching, and this guy said, "Man, I want to send you tapes of my pastor." And he would send me monthly tapes of Freddie Haynes.
Yes, sir.
And of course, Caesar Clark, Jasper Williams, uh, you know, um, Curtis Wallace, because Dr. Wallace would come to Alexandria sometimes.
Right.
Dr. Isidore Edwards, because he would preach in our city. But at 19 years old, before I got my first church, man, long before I knew him as family and friend, uh, Dr. Ralph West. That's when I really fell in love with preaching,
Yes, sir.
because he was doing revival in my hometown with Isidore Edwards. And you have to imagine that kind of preaching in the uh, same city, same day. You have
My
Dr.
goodness.
Isidore Edwards at noonday and Dr. Ralph West at night.
Wow. I can't
That's
even.
crazy. That's crazy, man. And so I missed Dr. Edwards at noonday, but I never missed Dr. West. And that was the first time I ever saw a preacher preach with no paper,
Mm.
no notes, no cards. I'm 19, Doc. This 6'6", long, tall, slender guy get up articulate, getting up, quoting Longfellow. Uh, before he preaches, poised, dignified, refined. And I said, I don't know who he is, but I want to be just like him.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And man, that day and to this day, and if you know me, not because I know him as family, but at 19, Doc, Ralph West became my favorite preacher. And
Yes,
at
sir.
46, Ralph West is still my
Yes, sir.
favorite preacher, Doc.
Yes, sir. Well, it's amazing you said that because I started preaching actually under Dr. C.W. Wallace at Pilgrim Rest. When I
Did
was
you?
19 years old, yeah, I started because what happened was I'm originally from Oklahoma City, so my home church is Greater Mount Olive and I joined under the late A. Glenn Woodbury, but then my family moved to Texas and we joined because A. Glenn Woodbury and C.W. Wallace were great friends, so we joined Pilgrim Rest, and that's where I was baptized at Pilgrim Rest. And then when I was 19, I was licensed to preach for C.W. Wallace. And to this day, and he's always said I'm his youngest son in the ministry because I started at 19. But it's interesting what you say because as you say, you had those role models. For me, it was A. Glenn Woodbury. It was my family relative, Dr. Ricky Turner. It was C.W. Wallace, and it's my pastor now, Reverend Dr. E.W. Bryan. So I understand what you mean by when you say those influences, those who really influence you. So when you're talking about these influences and this reading and this and preaching, how did you get to your first church? Did they find you? Were you recommended? How did that process happen?
Man, Chris, every church I've had, I've been recommended for.
Yes, sir.
Um, my first church, again, me and Dr. Lee Fields, who is my wife's cousin, we were in the mall,
Okay.
December 23rd, I think it was,
Okay.
or Christmas Eve, I think, one of those days, Doc. It was close to Christmas, and uh, his cousin, Dr. Deacon George Fields, was in the mall, and he said, "Hey, cuz, man, listen, uh, we're looking for a pastor. We want a young man who can preach." And I'm glad I saw you. He said, "Who can you recommend?" And he said, "This young man right here."
Mm.
Uh, my second church, Dr. Carl Armstead, who was from Alexandria, that time was in Port Arthur. He called Lee Fields and said, "Lee, their best friend." He said, "Lee, do you think Jordan can handle, Christian faith over in Port Arthur?" He said, "Sure, I believe it." And Carl Armstead recommended me for Christian faith. I got to Houston on the recommendation of Dennis Jones at
Mm-hmm.
Gethsemane. I was ready to go. Uh, and I said, Pastor Jones, actually, Dennis Jones and Tim Glenn were preaching in Port Arthur at the time. And he said, "Man, I got a call from the deacon chairman. Um, Send me your resume. And, I think they'll call you to preach." And so everywhere I've gone, I've I've been recommended.
That's a blessing. So in these first two churches, um, how was that learning experience as it prepared you for where you currently are? What did you learn from those first two pastorates that got you ready, in a sense, for Lyons Unity?
Um, Man, so many lessons. Uh, so many. I think the first thing, man, is take preaching serious. Is that they're the Lord's people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you'll find yourself evolving in different areas of your own
Right.
personal life, your devotional life. You learn how to deal with conflict, uh, foolishness, uh, because I think every assignment gets you prepared for the next assignment.
Right.
And so you just learn lessons that you don't think you're going to learn, or you may feel that this doesn't even apply to me. But trust me, Doc. I think my first church taught me that, and this is gonna sound rude. My first church taught me that everybody in church ain't saved,
Mm-hmm.
and that church can be a mean place at times.
Right.
You know, and that was hurtful for me, man, because I just thought, church, Doc, I love you and you can't do nothing about it.
Right.
It's like, wow, But my second church, man, I think I grew up there.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest lessons church taught me is how to deal with confrontation.
Mm-hmm.
And going into a Black Baptist church where their mentality is already one way.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think you're going to change that overnight, you have literally fooled yourself.
Yes, sir.
Preach, love the people. And I think one of the biggest things I learned is this, Chris. Take your time.
Yes, sir.
Don't be in a rush to change everything, but most of all, whatever God is leading you to change and do in the area of ministry, teach on it,
Mm-hmm.
preach on it, and show people that there is your way and there is the biblical way. Now, some
Right.
people won't care about the biblical way because it's their way and their way only.
Right.
But you'll get that much more success when you take your time and don't have that because I'm the pastor mentality. Because in essence, you aren't that pastor yet. You're that preacher.
Right.
But you aren't that pastor yet.
Yes, sir.
So just take your time. Don't be in a hurry. And know one thing, that Black Baptist people fight over not over principle, but they fight over, I would say, purpose.
Mm.
You know, uh, because the principle is the same.
Right.
Jesus Christ.
Yes, sir.
But we fight in church over choir robes and colors.
Mm-hmm.
Process, not purpose. Process is a better word. So my thing is to every young pastor, man, take your time. And most of all, man, have you some people in your ear that you'll listen to.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You need a pastor and you need a mentor that you'll listen to. I'll tell anybody, man, I've made it 17 years at Lyons Unity by the grace of God and the wisdom of Dr. Joe Ratliff and Dr. Ralph West.
Yes, sir.
Because when they would speak to me, I have enough respect to know they aren't trying to hurt me.
Yes, sir.
Or mislead me. And for me, Doc, every time I have listened to them, I've always come out on top.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So, big bro. So now let's talk about Lyons Unity. And for those who are watching, you get to Lyons Unity, and of course, this church is a well-known church because it was pastored by the late great Reverend Dr. O.C. Johnson.
Absolutely.
So when you get to Lyons Unity, and this is where I'm excited to have this conversation with you. Talk to us first about how was it when you first got there at Lyons Unity. But this is where I really want to get to. Encourage us, because there may be a pastor listening, there may be a pastor who gets called to a church where they're replacing somebody who's been at a church for a long time, who's developed a state name, a national name, who's had this big prominent ministry, who has all these sons in the ministry, and is basically looked at as a larger than life figure, and then they're gone, and then you're the new pastor coming in replacing. So how does a pastor not allow let's just say, how does a pastor not allow the pressure from the members make him lose himself when he steps into the pulpit of a church where it had that dynamic speaker?
First of all, Doc, don't let a dead man kill you.
Mm. Yes, sir.
Check your ego at the door.
Yes, sir.
Because his legacy is bigger than your current presence.
Wow. Wow.
And if you don't check your ego, his legacy will destroy you internally.
Mm.
Because guess what? People will still call his name.
Yes, sir.
There's a good chance his spouse, his children, his grandkids may still be a part of the Lord's church, that church. And so if you aren't careful, man, probably up to year 5, Jordan Johnson, I would still have people call me Pastor Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
And then would be quite sorry. Pastor Jordan, I'm so sorry. Hey, give me a hug. It's fine. Are you mad at me? Absolutely not. He was here 38 years.
Yes, sir.
He was iconic. But I've seen pastors who are young lose a church
Mm-hmm.
because they're fighting with a dead man. They're mad because his picture is there, or because his name is attached to the fellowship hall. And so the biggest thing is, man, be comfortable in who you are.
Right.
And I pay homage to Pastor Johnson's wife yearly for her birthday.
Yes, sir.
Because Chris, when I got to Houston, no one knew me.
Yes, sir.
My cousin is here, Jim Glenn, Pastor Tim Glenn's brother. But no one knew me. But Jim Glenn and Rivers Glover the first.
Right.
But I got invitations to preach because people said I followed OC.
Mm-hmm.
So they assumed I could preach because I followed OC Johnson.
Right.
And never heard me. And
Mm-hmm.
so there were some places that I would preach where he would preach.
Right.
Because of who he was, because of who I followed. And so I still honor his legacy to this day. I honor his wife to this day. And so the biggest thing is, man, don't try to fill his shoes. Because that's not your assignment.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Be okay with hearing his name. Honor his wife, his family, and just do what you do. But don't wrestle with a deceased person.
Right.
Because you're not gonna win.
Right.
You're not gonna win.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, because I've talked to pastors in Texas who have said, who have admonished him. And so that's why I'm glad you answered that question, because sometimes a person may feel like I'm replacing this iconic figure. And it's like somebody may try to be in competition. And as what you just said, you can lose yourself and hurt your own personality and pastor it because you're too busy trying to fight somebody who's already deceased and gone.
It makes you look immature.
Right.
And it makes you think that you're uncomfortable with your own gifts.
Yes, sir.
Man, O.C. Johnson was a preacher.
Right.
O.C. Johnson was a singer.
Mm-hmm.
And I do what I do.
Absolutely.
But I couldn't do it like that. And I'm okay with that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
I
sir.
do what I do, but Pastor Johnson could flip a joint, Doc.
I've heard the stories.
I mean, even as he aged,
Yes, sir.
he was still unmerciful.
Yes, sir.
And so I celebrate the gifts that God gave him. And I mean, his son still preaches for me, once a year. Again, coming up this month, we're going to honor his wife for, I think it's her 84th, 85th birthday.
Okay.
I've been honoring her since I've been there for the last 17 years. You know,
Hmm.
that takes up nothing from me.
Right.
And probably, man, one of my biggest supporters and biggest encouragers has been Mrs. Johnson.
Yes, sir.
I can truthfully say that lady hasn't caused me one day of trouble.
Yes, sir.
You know, yeah. So, yeah,
Well, I appreciate that because, like I said, somebody may be in that position and they want, because, and it's good that you said, embrace the legacy. So when you get to Lions Unity and you're starting out and then you're getting your feet wet, but you're also getting comfortable, what were some of the encourage us, when it gets to like an established church, because Lions Unity was an established church. So even though you're
absolutely.
coming to an established church, how do you still, in a way, how do you still let the vision that God has given you go forward, even though you're going to be dealing with people who like it this way, you're going to be dealing with people who like it that way, but you still have to let the vision take its course.
Preach, teach, be patient,
Mm-hmm.
wait on God's timing. Don't move in your anger and your frustration.
Stay there.
Yeah, don't move in your anger and your frustration.
Yes, sir.
Uh, because church folk and know one thing, that even though God sent you there, they look at you as an outsider.
Right.
This is our church.
Right.
We call you to our church. So you have to literally be patient, because number one, they have to, although they called you, they have to get used to how you preach, how you teach, how you operate, how you do pastoral care. I think one of the biggest things for me was, man, Pastor Johnson was very personable.
Mm-hmm.
You could just walk in Doc's office. His phone number was on the front of the program. He had an office line on the front of the program.
Right.
So Pop was very, very personable. Uh, I'm personable, yet I'm distant,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Yes, sir.
I'm not coming to your house. I don't want folk up in my space every Sunday before church, after church. You just can't walk up in my office. And so there was I had to adjust and they had to adjust. And
Right.
so my thing is, be patient with that adjustment time. Because what you're going to hear is, Pastor so-and-so didn't do it like that.
Right.
Reverend so-and-so wouldn't have said that or done that. And so you have to literally calm yourself down and say, listen, okay, it's early. Preach, teach, preach, teach, preach, teach, love, preach, all that stuff. Love them, preach, teach, pray for them, be their pastor. And the biggest thing is, man, don't fight because they fight you.
Mm.
And don't in your frustration, don't use the Lord's pulpit as a battering ram.
Yes, sir.
And one in the prolific words of one of my dear friends, don't burn down the whole barn trying to kill one rat.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah, here's the thing, Doc. Every preacher needs to understand this. If you pastor people, if God can't change them, if the gospel can't change them, you can't change them.
Right.
But most of all, God did not send you to any church to change anyone.
Mm.
He sent you to preach.
Yes,
It
sir.
is the gospel's job. It is God's job to change people's hearts and minds, not your job. And we
Yes, sir.
put too much pressure on ourselves,
Mm.
So, for me, man, I just had to preach and teach and just be patient. Because again, I'm the second pastor uh, of a church that's 38 years old, and they've known one pastor for 38 years,
Right.
Oliver Carlton Johnson.
Right.
So I couldn't go in and I'll tell you what most guys won't say. I wasn't running nothing.
Right.
I was the preacher, but it was a board-led church. Most guys won't tell you that.
Mm-hmm.
They'll lie. Doc, you ain't running nothing. Nothing, Doc. And guess what? Those things have to be earned.
Yes, sir.
That trust has to be earned and developed.
Yes, sir.
And so my thing is, man, I just had to go in preaching and teaching. Now,
Yes,
did
sir.
I get frustrated? Absolutely. Absolutely. And, but again, thank God for wisdom
Yes, sir.
of my elders.
Well, that's definitely very important. So then, talk to us about your preaching your preaching preparation, especially as a pastor. Do you have a preaching calendar, or talk to us about your preaching preparation process?
Let me say this before I go. I'm reading comments as we talk,
Oh
and
Lord,
William McKinley Jackson is on here.
that
Check
my
the
big
link in.
brother. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
Uh,
Lord.
Jack owes me some money, Doc. Jack stole my money clip years ago, and he ain't paid me back yet, Doc.
Oh Lord.
And matter of fact, I set Jack up with his wife. He still owed me a check for that. Yeah, I was paying his pastor back in Port Arthur.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Doc. So he owed me. He ain't
Well,
paid me yet, Doc.
I'm gonna call him and mess with him about that.
Yeah, Doc. But back to your question, man. Dr. West helped me plan preaching.
Yes, sir.
Uh, because I had never did that before.
Okay.
I was preaching week to week, and just how we do, just
Right. Right.
yeah, bouncing from book to book to book.
Right. Absolutely.
And then I heard a comment by Dr. I.V. Hilliard, who made a comment, and it was a kind of a sly comment, but Doc, it was the truth.
Right.
He said, sometimes you Baptist boys don't get it because your people don't get it because y'all jump all across the Bible.
Mm.
And he said you can't preach on giving one Sunday and then go to love the next Sunday.
Wow. Wow.
He said, stay on it for a minute.
Right.
If you're gonna talk about love, you can't talk about love this week and then you on for talk about have it set where if you're on giving on Sunday and on Wednesday.
Right.
For the entire month. If
Right.
you're on love and so between he and Dr. West, that helped me plan preaching. And number two, it helps the people that I pastor follow along as well.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so yeah, reading, meditation, the whole prayer piece, and sometimes, man, my preaching is what Dr. Ellis Patterson Jr. called mirroring the moment.
Mm-hmm.
It may be a billboard, a conversation, it may be an article,
right,
and I mirror that moment,
right,
and God just births a sermon out of that moment,
right.
Yeah.
Well, I like how you said that. What Dr. Hilliard said about continue to drive it. So, as it relates to preaching, especially, and I want to ask this question because I think this would be very helpful when it comes to preaching, as a new pastor. what are ways, what are do's and don'ts when it comes to preaching as a new pastor from your experience?
Preach the gospel. Don't preach people's business.
Okay. Yeah.
Don't preach out of anger because you had a bad meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Again, don't use the Lord's pulpit as a battle ram because you mad with Deacon so and so. And so now, instead of being a Christian and talking to him in the office and being a man, you want to get in the pulpit. Because sometimes, man, there are times stuff is going on at your church. The people have no clue what's going on.
Right.
But by the time you get through preaching, they're gonna be like, what's going on around here? Because Reverend is clearly mad.
Right.
And when people can pick up on your anger and not grace, mercy, and salvation, that's a problem.
Wow.
So my thing is, man, plan your preaching. The basics, man. Doctrinal preaching, salvation. Dealing with grace, dealing with mercy, dealing with love, forgiveness. Do some stuff on giving.
Mm-hmm.
Just start at the basics of salvation. Number one,
Yes,
because
sir.
do that.
Yes, sir.
And I would say, in your Bible lessons, deal with some stuff like, why are we Baptists? Because you got some folk in your church who have no clue why they're Baptists.
Right.
My first thing at Lyons Unity, I think, was the church covenant.
Mm-hmm.
I dealt with that in its entirety, and then I went on to the Articles of Faith.
Mm-hmm.
Just trying to get a foundation. And for me, it was different because Dr. Johnson was old school.
Right.
So they had Sunday school, or they had Bible study, but Doc taught the Sunday school lesson at Bible study. And so when I came in keeping the same day, but I wasn't doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna teach that. I'm gonna teach lessons. And so I just went from, again, the covenant to Articles of Faith, salvation. I think I did grace, mercy, just that whole piece, and then I dealt with giving.
Right.
Which was different for them because Doc never preached on money. So you can imagine how that went
over. I can imagine some questions saying why he preaching on what's going on with the money, what's going on with the
and here's the whole piece too, man. Now when I do that whole giving piece, bro, we have straight church. Them folk go in like it's Pentecost Sunday.
Amen.
And one of the things I had to do, Dennis Jones taught me this. Dennis Jones said to me, he said, Jordan, resist the urge to hoop every Sunday.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And so, man, there were times that I may go 2 or 3 months without a shutdown.
Yes, sir.
Because my church was a good church, but Dr. Johnson was topical preacher, storyteller, singer, hooper. And so, man, when I first got there, Chris, and my lesson, Doc, they were quiet. Doc, I would get a few amen, but for the most part, it was quiet. And so when I would cut the corner of the clothes, house go up. And I said to myself, I got a problem here. And so, man, I just, again, hearing Dr. Jones saying, resist the urge to close, work your lesson. And so now, man, I enjoy preaching there because I don't have to close. It's optional for me.
Yes, sir.
Because now they're at a point where, Doc, if your lesson is tight, they may flip the pew.
My goodness. But Big Bro, you just hit on something I think is very, very important for all of us. Is that where you say, especially let's just say, like if you came from a church that was a talk back to church, or even if it's your first pastor, but you came from a church where you were an associate that they always would go in, always would talk back and shout. But now you're going to a church, as you just said, that was quiet, and you're not used to that. So how as a pastor, as you say, preach and teach, but when it comes to the preaching and teaching, how do you get the membership to the point where it say, okay, don't just wait for the icing when you still got the cake.
Preach
Don't
and
wait.
teach.
Yes, sir.
Preach and teach. You don't have to explain it to them.
Right.
Be repetitive in what you're doing, and then as your palate develops for deeper study, better preaching, they'll appreciate it
Yes, sir.
because you're taking that sense of emotionalism from them.
Mm,
Now, if you gonna shout, you gonna shout not based upon when he do it, ain't he all right when he make a way.
mm.
It's gonna be based upon points 1, 2, and 3.
Yes, sir.
You know, and so man, my thing is develop your lesson. Uh, and trust me, I love to close. You know, I'm not a McKinley Jackson. You know, McKinley is one of those guys where I think honestly he's a secret gem in some cases.
Oh, I tell him all the time, it's not fair that he has that kind of voice. I tell him
Yeah,
that all the
you
time.
know, anybody who can sing, play the organ, be smart, uh, have a great lesson, and that vocally gifted. I just want to slap him every time I want to see him. You know, it's like but for me, man, I had to resist that urge, and now, uh, but also that my people appreciate preachers now who don't close.
Wow.
Because man, there are so many guys who are gifted preachers who don't close.
Yes, sir.
And if you aren't careful, your people will miss their gifts
Mm-hmm.
because he or she didn't trade it down.
Yes, sir.
And so if you think about it, Cleophas LaRue,
Yes, sir.
LaRue, you know what I'm saying, or of course Gardner Calvin Taylor,
Yes,
you know what
sir.
I'm saying, not Frederick G. Sampson,
Yes, sir.
Emmanuel Scott,
Yes, sir.
those guys weren't closers,
Yes, sir.
but just iconic,
Yes, sir.
in that gift of exposition.
Yes, sir.
A Sam Proctor, a Miles Jones, not
Yes, sir.
not not closers, Doc, but that lesson.
Yes, sir.
And the problem is if you bring people to your church, and if your people only want to hear hooping, they gonna miss the gifts that those type of preachers are.
Wow.
And I
Yes,
want
sir.
to expose my people to not just one type of preaching.
Yes, sir.
And every sermon should not be late night directed.
Yes, sir.
You know, one time a young man was preaching and he had a good lesson. And when he got through, Dr. West said, "You had a good sermon till you closed."
Wow.
He said, "It didn't require it,
Wow.
but you thought you had to do it."
Wow.
You know.
Wow. So then, as we're talking about, and I got a couple more questions, Big Bro. Thank you for your time today. As we talk about hooping, it's been, we a lot of us love to hoop. We love to tune. It's our gift. It's what we love to do. So, but let me ask you this question: can we sometimes, as Dr. Ralph West just said, can we sometimes hurt ourselves and even hurt our message and really even hurt the preparation process in the sermon before we get to the pulpit because we may be too hoop driven?
Well, my thing is that let let the hoop be organic in spirit,
Yes, sir.
not forced, not that you have to do it. You know, man, I've had people visit and join Lions Unity uh, more so from funerals at times because I'm up 10 minutes.
Yes, sir.
I deal with a lesson. I sit down. You know, don't force it. Don't force it as if you have to do it.
Yes, sir.
You know, if it's there and God is there, Doc, and the environment is right, take off. But I will say this too, man, as a pastor, when you're trying to get certain things across to your people, you have to be the pastor.
Yes, sir.
Now, I can come to your church and hoop in revival 3 nights, or come for Men's Day, because guess what? That's your church. But for me, I'm trying to get these people from point A to point B. And sometimes being emotional ain't what they need. It's being intellectual
Right.
for me to get my point home, for them to see what I'm talking about. So it's not that, you know, because sometimes my people would say to me, let's say I would teach the whole month of February, and then we go out in March. You know, I'm at a anniversary, and you know, Doc, it's a good house, it's a good environment, and I'm closing. And my folk would be like, "Well, Pastor, you don't preach that hard at our church." I'm trying to teach you all. He called me to preach. I did my assignment.
Mm.
My assignment here and my assignment at Lions Unity is quite different.
Yes, sir.
And if you aren't, and again, I don't, and trust me, I ain't anti-hooper, because guess what, Doc? I love to hoop and I love to hear it.
Yes, sir.
God knows I do. I'm right there with everybody else, phones out, yelling,
Yes,
screaming,
sir.
don't stop.
Yes, sir.
That's, you know, again, McKinley Jackson is so gifted, Marcus Cosby, those guys. But Doc, uh, and there are times where, man, it becomes organic, and I may close every Sunday. My thing is, let God do it.
Yes, sir.
Don't force it,
Yes, sir.
you know, and don't feel like you have to do it. Because what happens is, I think what's happening in this environment, Chris, preachers are making it difficult for preachers.
Mm.
Because if we don't hoop and holler, other preachers become so critical of other preachers. Oh man, he
Wow.
ain't pull it, Doc. Man, he ain't, man, he's all right, Doc, but he ain't dumped the house. Reverend, God ain't never called us to dump no house.
Wow.
He called us to teach the gospel, to bless his people, to share Jesus. And we have transformed church into entertainment
Mm.
because of our egos and being one dimensional. Oh, Doc, I dumped the house. Reverend, who got saved? Whose life was transformed? Who was helped?
Wow.
Because if your only ambition is to dump the house, Doc, that's immature.
Hmm.
And you have made the gospel. It's almost like Chuck Swindoll raised the question in his book, Improving Your Servant. When he raised the question, are you a celebrity or a servant?
Mm.
And we have to bring this celebrity preacher stuff under control, man. We have to do it.
Yes, sir.
We have to do it, Doc. We
Yes,
have to
sir.
do it. I
Yes, sir.
mean, because the gospel, it will be in horrible hands if we don't get this under control.
Wow.
You know, because for and let's be honest, man, if you don't pastor certain churches, wear certain kind of suits, you know, folk discount you.
Wow. Yes, sir.
And there's an arrogance that comes along with that.
Yes, sir.
But that God has some preachers we ain't never heard of,
Most definitely.
who are gifted and who are doing major work and are major preachers,
Yes, sir.
you know.
My goodness. Wow, that was wow. That was That was powerful right there, and that's so true. So then, big bro, talk to us about the importance, because I know you have an earned doctorate. So talk to us about the importance of education.
Well, actually, man, my doctorate is honorary.
Honorary. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's
My
honorary.
apologies.
No, it's honorary. I'm working on an MDiv right now at Proctor.
Right.
Um, I don't use it much. But I at times I do. But man, educate for me, man, education is again back to C. McLean. You can you can't be dumbed out because your pews aren't dumb.
Yes, sir.
Your pews are reading and have Bible software and buying books and going to well, at that time, going to conferences and going to conventions and being a part of this and a part of that. So you can't be just up there, with a bunch of cliches.
Yes,
Now,
sir.
here is the whole piece, Doc. And this is what I'll say. Every preacher is not meant for the academy. And every preacher should not be made to feel insufficient because they didn't go to seminary.
Mm-hmm.
Because um, some preachers are actually, man, self-taught,
Mm-hmm.
anointed. Uh, it might be an economic issue. They may go to a
Right.
Bible college or a Bible school. It might be unaccredited, but they put some work in.
Mm-hmm.
And so my thing is, if you can go to seminary, fine, do it. If that's your thing, do it. But we shouldn't disrespect or discount Reverend so and so because his doctorate is from a school you ain't never heard of or unaccredited or whatever. Maybe that's where he is academically and mentally.
Right.
But he has a great prayer life, a great devotional life. He has a great life at home in his own study time. And when he or she gets up, you can tell. But in whatever you do, whether it's home study, whether it's at a Bible college or where it is, get your lesson. Get your lesson done. And if you have the opportunity to go to grad school, wherever you can, do it if you can do it. But I think at times too, the black preacher puts too much pressure on other black preachers, on black preachers to say, "Oh man, discount him and discount her because they didn't go to Proctor or Southwestern or they didn't go to Howard. They ain't nobody." You can't do folk like that, man. Because very few folk don't know this, but Dr. Miles Jerome Jones didn't have an earned doctorate.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Gardner Calvin Taylor didn't have an earned doctorate.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
And so we hold them both in high esteem. Now, of course, there's only one Taylor, one Jones, but the point is, God can still use you if you don't go to the academy.
Yes,
It's
sir.
about how you study, how you pray, how you prepare yourself. Because I know some guys, Chris, who don't go who have been in nobody's school, but brother, their libraries are from here to there,
Mm-hmm.
and they are studious in their study.
Yes, sir.
And when they preach, you couldn't tell. Because let's be honest, Chris, every preacher we call doctor in church ain't no doctor.
Right.
Some of them guys got a GED. But that's what we do. Reverend Doctor this, Reverend Doctor that. And I'm cool with that if that's your thing. But if you can go to school, go to school. But don't discount people who don't go.
Yes, sir.
Don't be disrespectful, man. I'm not with that at all.
Wow. Yes, sir. I appreciate that because yeah, I know great pastors, great preachers I've heard who necessarily don't have the earned doctorates or they've gone to prominent seminaries, but you get them in the pulpit, I mean, phenomenal.
Yeah.
Even some of the great ones that we've admired throughout the years, some of the legendary African American pastors and preachers didn't necessarily go to these great prominent schools, but get them there on Sunday morning, you couldn't, as you're right, you said, Big Bro, you couldn't tell.
Yeah, but I think for the young preacher, man, my biggest thing is don't be lazy.
Yes, sir.
Don't be academically lazy, man.
Yes, sir.
Uh, don't do that. Whether if you can go to school, do it.
Yes, sir.
Uh, uh, get some kind of training under your belt.
Yes, sir.
Because what happens is, man, if you're going to pastor one day, it's hard to lead people who are academically trained, but their pastor isn't.
Wow.
So
Wow.
you got Dr. So and so out here, you got attorney so and so out here,
Yeah.
you got nurse so and so here, but Reverend ain't got nothing.
Mm.
And to be honest with you, bruh, and this may sound rude, but for a lot of people, their pastor is a showcase.
Mm.
People want to brag on their pastor. My pastor did this. My pastor went here. My pastor is Reverend Dr. So-and-so. And so, and two, now, man, most churches, as you well know, aren't calling preachers unless they have some kind of academic status.
Yes, sir.
Whether it's an MDiv or something, 5 years, something.
Right.
So, and we have too many lazy preachers in the pulpit as well, man.
Mm.
And when I say that, I ain't lying, because when you hear him preach, you can say, Doc, he ain't spent no time with that, Doc. He ain't spent, I ain't trying. He ain't spent no time with that.
Right.
So my thing is, don't be lazy.
Wow. Well, I appreciate that insight as well. And let me just ask one more question, then we'll get ready to close this. Talk to us just about the personal life of the preacher, because I know now you're married. I know you're married, and
22 years.
22 years.
23
yeah.
years.
23. So just talk to us about the importance of family, and also the importance of making sure you're taking care of yourself, hobbies and things like that, just to keep your own self fresh and in tune.
You have to have a life outside of church.
Yes, sir.
Or you'll die or go crazy.
Yes, sir.
For me, I'm not, I know a lot of black preachers golf. I never could get the swing of that.
Right.
The gym is my salvation.
I know that's right, because you inspired a lot of us
Yeah.
throughout the country to get back into the gym when we saw your weight loss transformation.
Yeah, the gym, man, because me personally, bro, pastoring in Fifth Ward, nothing healthy out there. I'm eating French's chicken and the soul food places, Doc, on a daily, weekly basis, man. And eating bad, Doc, and church stress just ain't good for you.
Yes, sir.
And so when I got to my physical, man, I was pre-diabetic and pre-hypertensive.
Mm.
And that scared me to death. My blood pressure was going up and down, more so up. Church stress, eating bad, man. And so the gym became my sanctuary.
Yes, sir.
So, eating better, that the weight came off. And that's where I go to relieve stress.
Right.
Because because Doc, if you aren't careful, as you'll pick up some vices that may become detrimental to you.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to point that energy in a direction that will add to you, not take away from you.
Yes, sir.
So whether it's golf, whether it's the gym, whether it's bowling, take some time off. You don't have to preach every Sunday. You need mental breaks. If it's just to go to the next county, the next city for a couple of days and rest yourself. Your folks need time. Don't save everybody else's house and you lose your own.
My goodness.
Don't be there for their children, but your children are angry with you because you weren't there for them.
Mm.
You were at this kid's graduation, trying to get this kid out of jail, at court with this kid, but you miss your kid's soccer game. You miss your kid's graduation. You miss your kid's dance recital because you being the pastor, Doc. And them same people will put your butt out as soon as you mess up.
My.
And you got to come right back home to the same people at home that you neglected.
Wow.
Or your kids end up growing bitter and mad and hate church.
Yes, sir.
Because they lost their father to the church.
Wow.
And so your own kids don't know you. You don't know them.
Wow. Stranger.
But you the pastor. Doc.
My goodness.
Doc, I'm going home.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I see y'all. Y'all handle it. Like I'm going home.
And so you don't have to be at everything at the church if it's gonna cost you your family and yourself.
And you have to teach people that.
Right.
Because people think Reverend is supposed to be there. You have to and you have to teach them that. If you have an assistant pastor or executive pastor or someone to say, hey, when I'm not here, he represents me. I'm tired. Right. I'm mentally worn. I'm sick of preaching. I'm sick of y'all, if truth be told.
Yes, sir.
You can't say that, but
Right. Yeah.
But sometimes you feel that way. Because guess what, man? Here's the whole piece, Doc. You're the pastor, but you're human too.
Yes, sir.
And there is no S on your chest.
Yes, sir.
And Doc, you will give yourself, and you end up having a stroke, heart attack, eat yourself into a grave, diabetic, high blood pressure. And guess what? In 6 months or less, there'll be a new pastor.
Yes, sir.
They're going to plaque you, put your picture on the wall, give your wife, maybe give her something. And you are a blessed memory, Doc. So take the time. Take the time. And also, man, and you didn't ask me this, but I'm just gonna say it. To every preacher, make sure your money right.
Yes, sir.
Save your money. Get an IRA. Get a retirement. Harvey Clemens told me years ago, you can't wear all your money.
Wow.
And you can't drive all your money. So it makes no sense to have a suit from Michael Said or Robbie or whoever else you use custom made, but you can't buy dinner after church.
My goodness.
And so when you can't retire because you have spent all your money on ties and shirts and cars and rims and watches and rings to impress people. And Freddie Haynes says, we buy things with money we ain't got to impress people we don't even like. So make sure that your money is right. Make sure that you got to retire. Make sure that your church has a retirement for you or an IRA for you. So at 65 years old, you can't, if you want to, you can come out. And don't be there till you wear a diaper and it depends because you had to make preparations down the road.
Wow. And
to every pastor, preacher, man, make sure you have life insurance for your family.
Yes, sir.
That when you die, Doctor, that church ain't gonna give Mrs. or Mr. if you're a female pastor, preacher, nothing after you gone. You got to have stuff in place, man. And preachers are guilty of looking the part. We custom made, Doc. We got on Gucci and Louis Vuitton and Prada and Ferragamo, and Doc ain't got a dime in our pocket.
Wow.
Ain't got a dime in our pocket, man. So you got to make sure that your family is prepared if you get sick. What about, insurance in case you get sick, you can't preach for a while. Doc, we got to move beyond this. I'm only somebody if I'm wearing a certain suit or if I'm wearing a certain. Doc, I don't have Ralph West money. So how I look trying to compete with him?
Right.
I do what I do.
Yes, sir.
On my level, on my budget.
Yes, sir.
And I'm okay with that.
Yes, sir.
But I promise you, Doc, when I close my eyes for the last time, nobody in this joint will have nothing to worry about.
Yes, sir. Yes,
That
sir.
I can promise you.
Yes, sir.
You know, but so the pastor must change. And even for young preachers, young pastors, when you get a church man, don't negotiate all of your salary in money. Teach them folk to give you some benefits.
Yes, sir.
Housing benefits, car allowance, pay your water bill, pay your gas. Because when they pay you, when they pay the light bill, the water bill, whatever it is, that frees your money up. You know, but we just want all salary. Just give me no, man. You pay this and pay that and pay this and pay that. So that'll free you up to do certain things with your money. But if you want to invest, you can save more. You can put more in your IRA, your 401k. Because you won't forever be the young preacher.
Yes, sir.
Man, I was just 29 at Lyons Unity. And now I got guys calling me Unc and Pop. And I'm like, who y'all talking
to? Yes, sir.
But my son is 22 years old. And then he 21, he 23. So for them, I am their father. So even with you, Chris, you won't always be the young Chris Brown.
Yes, sir.
You're going to look up and you're going to be somebody's daddy and somebody's somebody's pastor.
Yes, sir.
As you age.
Yes, sir.
So make sure that you and guys like you, make sure that you get your money right.
Yes, sir.
Because Doc, all this soup stuff, man, that stuff is to impress other preachers, Doc. You know, to impress them. Oh, Doc, you clean, but you broke. Doc, you not clean and broke. Did you hear what I said?
Yes, sir. I heard
clean
you.
And broke, Doc. Michael Saeed down, Doc. You got on Gucci shoes, Doc, Rolex, and you can't buy dinner afterwards. Because you have spent all of your money trying to impress other preachers to make them think that you are part of that club.
Wow.
But they won't tell you they hadn't always been able to do what they're doing now.
Right.
Which is why I love Dr. West so much. He tells his story. Can you imagine Dr. West in a two-door Datsun? Where that one time he was living in the hood, in city gas. So where he is now, Doc, he ain't always been. And stop trying to get there too soon. Take your time. Save your money. Invest. You know, you ain't asked me none of that. I know, but I felt compelled, man, because so many young preachers, man, we just do the wrong thing with our money, man.
Nah, I'm glad you brought it up. So keep going. Yeah. You got some more to talk about. Keep going.
And so you look up, Doc, and you almost 50, you ain't got nothing.
And let's be honest, I know one of my mentors, Pastor Lee Cooper from Prospect Baptist Church in Oklahoma City, always tells me about this all the time because it's like, he's told me this. He said it's embarrassing to be a circuit preacher and you can't even be buried.
Doc, I've let me tell you something, Doc. I know guys like that. They've had the Range Rover, they've had the S430, and they've had this, that, and the other. And then when they die, Doc, you get a phone call. Hey, man, so and so died. Can you help me? I can't help you do nothing. Go sell this car. I ain't Doc. Because if you can get custom-made rings and watches and suits, Doc, but you can't get life insurance, that tells me you don't love your own family.
Wow.
Because now your wife has to grieve and worry about how she going to pay your funeral and survive that because you clearly were irresponsible with your resources. So that I don't feel guilty not giving because you were irresponsible. Now what I'll do is I'll give your wife some money and give your kids some money, but they can put you in the field next door to the church. I don't care. Now that may sound rude, but that's why because it makes no sense, man. How do I look at 46 years old, Chris, I have a heart attack, and Nikki has to put a GoFundMe page out because I got custom made suits in my closet, shoes that cost more than some people's rent. But she got to beg to bury me. That's irresponsible, Doc. And it showed that you don't. It showed that you care more about your public perception than your own family. Now we got to sell fish place to bury you because you were sorry. I ain't with that, Doc. And
My goodness.
unfortunately, some of the young preachers don't have anybody to tell. Man, stop getting all them suits, Reverend. Number one, who you preaching for?
Right.
You ain't. Where you going, Reverend? I lived how I could live on my budget. At my first church, Chris, I may have had 3 suits, 4 suits, the same pair of black shoes. And sometimes I was broke and couldn't even get a haircut, but I preached anyway. And so my stuff came in levels, you know. And so where I am now, like I hadn't always been.
Yes,
and I'm
sir.
okay with that because it taught me honesty and integrity.
Yes, sir.
And it taught me to appreciate what I have. But it also taught me too that to plan. That so when I want to come out, I can come out. I won't have to be there with cancer and Alzheimer's and in a wheelchair because I need the check.
Right.
That I can come out and say, hey man, listen, look here, I've done 30. I'm old now, I'm tired. I want to go home and go sit in the back of the Presbyterian church and drink real wine for communion.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I don't want to be here all my life.
That part, you just really, even from the comments, you really blessed all of us talking about preparation as it pertains to life. Because yes, we are preachers, pastors, but there is still life that has to be lived. So saving money, the insurance, making sure the family is taken care of is very, very important. So I definitely appreciate you just for. I know that's just Holy Spirit just speaking through you to us. So I definitely appreciate you talking to us about that. So is there anything else? Go ahead.
And my thing is, if your church doesn't do that, teach them into it.
Yes, sir.
Or bring a seasoned guy that they know in. Because they may not take it from you. But if there's a seasoned pastor that they love, bring him in. Or bring her in and say, hey, this is what I need you to do, because the people may take, because some stuff, Doc, they ain't gonna take it from you.
Right.
Because you're young. At my first church, man, I was preaching on tithing at my first church. And now, Phil, are you saved? I know the answer. Go somewhere, eat some chicken. Chicken meets mister. At my first church, man, a deacon told me, I don't care what you say. I ain't tithing. I've been paying church dues. I'm going to keep on paying them. I don't care what you say. To my face, Doc. And I had a revival for stewardship. And I brought in Dr. Solomon Schroeder from my hometown for 3 nights on stewardship. After he got through preaching, that same deacon said, tithing is right.
Right.
Now, I had preached on tithing, but he told me he wasn't going to do it. But when a senior, older man came in and said the same thing, he got it. And it was tithing. So some stuff, man, they won't take from you because of your age.
Right.
But bring somebody in to say, hey, this is what we need to do for your pastor.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I'm done rambling, Doc.
Well, no, like I said, I appreciate you so much for this interview. I appreciate you spending some time with us and talking to us. Is there anything else you want to say about what? Go ahead.
Antoine Richardson raised the question: what are some tips for the young
Okay.
preacher in regards to saving money and ensuring financial freedom after retirement? Man, just start where you are.
Right.
Start where you are. If it's $100 a month, if it's $20 a week, start where you are on your budget, because if you don't touch it, it'll add up. And then once it adds up, you can move it around: mutual funds, stocks, bonds, pay the market, 401k, IRA, however you lay it. Or my thing is to find you, because I'm pro-black, a black financial planner.
Absolutely.
Who can help you, who can help guide you through the financial issues.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, we
McKinley, I'm gonna call you down.
yeah, I know you are. But no, I'm so grateful for this interview. This has been a blessing. Like, this has been so needed, so important for us to have this conversation. And I am appreciative for this conversation, for you sharing this precious time with us, big bro. It means so much to me. And I thank you for this time that you've shared with us. So I'm about to end this, but you don't log off yet, okay?
All
I'm
right,
about to
man.
end
Thank
this,
you.
but don't log off. But I want to tell everybody that is watch, thank you for watching, share, like, comment, whatever you can. But no, we thank you for this conversation today. Oh, and big bro, tell the people about, because you're an author as well. Tell them about your books and tell them about the location of your church, and if they're ever in Houston, go ahead and let them know.
Man, we're in Fifth Ward, 3215 Lyons Avenue. Of course, y'all can't come right now because of the
Right.
because of the COVID. But you can follow us on Facebook at Lyons Unity, or at WJ Ministries on Facebook and YouTube. We're live there on Wednesday and Sunday. My book is called Storm Survivors, man. It's out, so working on number 2 right now. So
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Well, like I said, thank y'all so much for listening. Thank once again, Pastor Jordan, for being a part of this. And so God
Thank you for
bless you
having me, man.
all.
Appreciate it.
Oh, yes, sir. God bless you
Blessings upon
all.
you in the new work too, man.
Oh, thank you.
And
Keep
the new
praying for me.
marriage as well.
Well, thank you. Keep praying for me in both regards.
Yes, sir.
Amen.
Yes,
So
sir.
we thank you. So God bless you. And like I said, big bro, don't log off just yet. All right.
All right, brother.